my name is Fraser Simons. This is my channel Springboard Thought. Today I'm going to do my weekly review or weekly reads type video for the week. I had consumed 6 things, I believe. If I have time, I'll talk about the stuff I'm currently reading and enjoying, but we'll see how long this runs. First, I read Sally Rooney's 2 stories on audio, on Audible. It was cheap, like $5 or something like that, and I just love Rooney, so I'll consume pretty much whatever she puts out. This is got not much meat and potatoes on them. It's kind of centers on a very specific interaction with narrative tension there until it is resolved and then flits out, basically. It does her sort of, as I would call it, trademark perspicacity about a intriguing situation in which it kind of becomes like a train wreck of these 2 people communicating, showcasing the way in which they've been socialized, and always leaves you with kind of a hint of too bad, so sad, almost haunted feeling of how at a later date, upon reflection, these people might have gone a different way. This argument or the interaction would have gone a different way had they employed different communication skills, which is kind of her jam, basically, is what I think anyway. And so there's a sort of non-judgmental willingness to fail, I guess, during these scenes that play out that again feel like watching a train wreck quality. And it just is very resonating with how some of my interactions, especially in my early 20s at least, have gone. And so I really connect with her stuff, and it's present in this, but it's not 2 fully fleshed out stories. It's just, as I said, circumstances are set up between these 2 characters. You kind of get to know them a little bit. There's a little bit of tension. We're out. That's it. So don't expect too much from it. I gave it 4 stars. I quite enjoyed it, and it gave me the fix I was looking for. Next, I consumed, finally, people who have been watching me for a while, I got Heartstopper Volume 4 in, finally, from Alice Oseman. That means I think it took me a full year to get this from the library. I think there's only a few copies, and it's a provincial system, so it just took a long time. People held on to it for a long time, even though it takes 3 hours to read, maybe. Fantastic stuff, 5 stars. I think Oseman is probably a lifetime subscriber in me, basically. Anything she puts out, I'll probably consume, and it's already sort of me rationing the other works that she has, such as Radio Silence, and I can't remember the other stuff, for future use, because much like anytime I really love an author, I find that I don't want to binge them and consume them completely. I sort of ration them out, as I said, across time when I need them. And this continues the story of a bi guy and a gay man who are going through a very I guess harrowing situation. I want to characterize it in the right way because it's a mental health issue. The previous volumes have the kind of set up as them going to get together, facing whether their student friends as they're in high school are going to be accepting or not, peer pressure, homophobia especially, stuff like that. Now that they're sort of in a good place and settled, some of their friends know. The previous volume was on a Paris trip where it was kind of a high note. This is more of a downbeat, for sure, but handled in a very well way. This is about an eating disorder, and it's kind of highlighting in a non-prescriptive way, I think anyway, the support that other people need from others even when they've been socialized, especially as men, to not depend on anybody else. Asking for help, knowing when something's wrong, and especially the kind of codependency that emerges in young teenagers' lives, but well into adulthood. Some people never shake it, really. But the notion that no one is an island, everybody needs support, codependency on one person is not fair, it hurts them, it hurts you. It's just like, yeah, all centered on mental health stuff like that, while also not making it like once you do reach out for help, and you start to get treatment, it isn't like a magic thing, like a magic wand that is waved and everything is better. So it's very nuanced, and I'm sure that this has been undergone with a whole bunch of readership giving feedback, because I found it to be completely perfect. I give it 5 stars. One of the few authors that can provoke like very strong emotions in me. I usually don't connect on that level typically, especially with YA, but this was exceptional, and I hope that this is getting stocked in high schools and junior highs and stuff like that. It's the kind of representation and due diligence that you want present and available in schools, because I think it is one of those things that could actually make a pretty big difference. Next, I read The Devil's Dictionary by Stephen Kotler. This is a sequel to another cyberpunk book that came out not too long ago, I think 2019, I want to say. This is Last Tango in Cyberspace, the first novel of this. It's about Lion Zorn, a character who is an empathy tracker. Think Will Graham from the Hannibal, so an empathy disorder essentially, where he's able to place himself in other people's circumstances, intuit what they go through, and feel what they feel, internalize it, and extrapolate from it. In Hannibal, of course, he uses it to catch killers. In this, it's more of a speculative work, I guess you could say. Like, he does use it, he is hired in this first one to find somebody who is missing. So it is kind of much more noir-esque in this one, and he is like not classic noir, and it is cyberpunk, so those things tend to be married anyway. It's a thriller, and I don't want to give too much away, but essentially it ends at a place in which he makes a very big decision that could affect the world in a sense of putting out a significant story from a journalistic perspective that could alter mega corporations going forward and culture and stuff like that. In The Devil's Dictionary, we pick up right from there, which I was surprised at. It didn't seem like a book that would be needing a sequel, really, but it's pretty interesting where it goes, though definitely more gonzo. So aspects of cyberpunk that we have present in this one is it's a thriller, so it's super fast-paced, the kind where it's like 1 or 2 pages is a chapter sometimes. It's pretty gonzo in the fact that there is empathy bonds that are present due to a drug that is consumed, or empathy trackers similar to Lion Zorn, which is not ubiquitous whatsoever. I think they said like very small amounts. Like I think he was aware of 15 to 20 of them present in the world in the first one, something like that. This drug sort of simulates what they can do, ostensibly. It's called Evo, or evolution, and people essentially trip a dream, which is evolution. So they sort of like pass out, lose consciousness, and the dream is embodiment of like algae all the way up to dinosaurs and wolves and all this kind of stuff. The inciting incident, I guess you could say, is empathy trackers are taken to a party. They imbibe this drug in whatever form it is. I believe it's like a nasal spray, but it varies. There's not much known about this at the time. And they start to go mysteriously missing. And people will wake up, they'll speak about this amazing evolutionary dream thing. They all seem to be dreaming kind of similar things. And again, he's kind of hired to find these missing empathy trackers, and things spiral from there. It is noir-esque again in that kind of characterization, except that he's the kind of noir detective that gets the shit kicked out of him all the time. He's not hard-nosed, he's not like hyper-masculine. He's an empathy tracker, so his primary drive is with empathy. He's not like a bro or trying to be like sleeping with every woman that he comes across, all that kind of stuff. It's merely the mystery aspect. And that component is further noir in the fact that it is not convoluted or contrived, but so intricate that the reader wouldn't be able to extrapolate the answer from the cast of characters and what's going on. It's far more stuff going on and more interesting science that is being speculated about in this one than the first one, even in my opinion, that I think it goes against enough genre types that you really kind of need to know what this book is about in order to enjoy it. But I enjoyed it quite a bit. The publisher sent it to me as an ARC because I enjoyed the first book and because I reviewed it on my cyberpunk blog. So this is more of the same, but probably better. Similarly, it is, because it's talking about empathy and the bonds with animals, it can feel kind of not as grounded in realism as people of cyberpunk and noir tend to expect. Yet it has the speculative fiction aspects of things being developed right now and some of the things that we use in our daily lives that are very pertinent and go in a way that, again, that I didn't see coming, as well as the mystery not being able to be solved by me was a positive aspect of the story for me, because typically when I read a mystery, I can figure it out very quickly, and I don't like that. You have to, it needs to be both inevitable and surprising, which is hard for a mystery to do. So if it cannot do that, I would prefer it to be so intricate that nobody could have figured it out, including the main character. And that's what this does. So it comes out late April, I believe, April 22nd, something like that. And I definitely recommend it. It's fun. It's not hyper-masculine, which I like. It has an interesting premise. All you have to do is get through the main conceit that people are kind of like, yeah, I don't know how to explain it other than people bond to specific animals. So there's been an accentuation since the first book of people who almost imprint, I guess, with a specific species of animal. And then it becomes an in-group, out-group extrapolation to a high degree. It increases the tribalism in people who take this drug and then become bonded to these animals and stuff. So if you're into that, I'd say roll with it, and then there's much more going on than you'd expect. It's up, I would say, upmarket, one mark above commercial fiction to my mind. War and Peace, The Chunkster, which was a slog. For me, this took 6 days and it felt like a month, which is, I know I'm kind of complaining when it takes people like a year to read this, or months and stuff like that, but it just felt like forever, just because Tolstoy in this deploys a bunch of things that I am not fond of. So where to start with this book? I'm not going to go over all of the stuff that I want to talk about it, because this book has been talked about to death. So I'm just going to say the issues that I had with it and go from there. I really liked the beginning. As soon as war stuff does begin in earnest, my attention span does waver. However, with the caveat that I don't like military and war fiction almost 100% of the time. There's a few books that are exceptions to this rule, but in general, I find that they're beating a dead horse. I don't like war. I know the travesties that happen, and I don't get anything out of what I find to be exceptionally derivative fiction centered on that topic that is real and has taken people's lives and feels awfully troubling to examine usually. Tolstoy straddles this line for me, I guess. He is very concerned with who writes history, who gets to write history, who is being characterized as good and bad, and just a lot of points that you should kind of know about war already: power, political structures, how people operate with privilege, who benefit, who doesn't, nationalism, stuff like that. It's all sort of stuff that I've already internalized. So I think if I had read this in my 20s, it would have blown my mind. But I have already read plenty of nonfiction, to say the least, about this kind of tribalism, nationalism, and history in general, as well as historical accuracy, stuff like that. And he makes the choice of interjecting his own voice quite often in order to make points that are already being made throughout the fiction, in order to make sure that the reader knows, hey, Bonaparte's an asshole for doing this specific thing, and history so far has characterized him like this, but actually, in certain instances, this is found to be untrue, yada, yada, yada. So sometimes it's enlightening, sometimes it's just let the scene play out. I know I can read, right? Then there's some sort of wizardry that happens where he makes you give a shit about rich people in a sort of Downton Abbey-esque type of way, where anytime I start caring about rich people, I know the writer is quite good, and I enjoy the family drama, larger arc trajectories of the major players in this book very much. I don't think he's got a penchant for writing actual war fiction, like the events of the war as they play out. He's very dry, and it's probably to give an homage to the people who fell and whatnot, but it's something that feels very like listicle and not something that added much to it, and it became a large drudgery essentially. And so the interjections that become very prescriptive in what you should be concluding from each scene became very taxing for me, even though ideologically I'm in complete alignment with what he's saying. The thing that I don't like about it is the dissonance that it creates, because when I read fiction, it feels like it's self-generated internally, and when an author interjects their own voice into that thing that is being self-generated by me, there's a dissonance that's present because it's at odds with what I am generating myself and extrapolating from. It feels like it shouldn't be present, and then it is wiping away the work that the scene and the plot and trajectory and character work is doing, because it's giving me the conclusions already, and I hate that. So for me, I kind of saw this coming already, not liking war military fiction, so I gave this 3. I think it accomplishes 3 stars, that is. I think it accomplishes what it sets out to do. I have huge expectations out of this book as well, so them being met is not a small feat. It still means that I appreciated portions of it, and I think it is very good for some people who don't mind these points being reiterated, or if they don't know them already, that would be good. Also, I don't like his specificity is very lacking. Sometimes it is very bland, essentially. Like, he'll characterize people as just simply beautiful, which means nothing. It is unconventional, or it is so conventional that when he characterizes the way in which somebody is beautiful, it feels unconventional sometimes. And what's more is, for the time period that it's written and for the time period that it's being written about, we don't know what conventional beauty is anyway. So the lack of specificity just makes it feel even more lacking to me, I guess you could say. There is some typical Tolstoy-esque type observances of mannerisms and interactions that are very astute and engaging and interesting, but it, I think, meanders far more into the bland territory, probably in order to keep the page count down, which it does not anyway. Had it been more engaging at a sentence by sentence level, maybe I would have come away with like a 4-star or something. Of note, maybe the translation is something there. It's a mod translation, I believe. Yeah, the mods. So maybe things are more flowery, more descriptive, more specific in other translations. I don't know. Next, I just finished this morning Jane Austen's Lady Susan, short little epistolary novel. It was an audiobook with different cast members for each character, of which there was 6, I think, maybe 7. And it's very short, very engaging, super fun, lighthearted. They characterize the main character as sort of villainous, which is, I think if it was a male, you would give them like a different characteristic, like plotting or something not like particularly evil or villainous like that. But anyway, it is very funny, I thought, exactly my type of humor. People are telling each other what is happening, and that creates the plot, which is very simple. Lady Susan is recently widowed. She's the talk of the town. She essentially is able to bed any man that she comes across. She's said to be very beautiful, very conniving, manipulative, etc. She visits a particular brother-in-law and sister-in-law because there's a sort of like a rich dude who's going to be visiting them, and it's all up to whether like you're trying to figure out just what her character is actually like, because she's characterizing herself and her motives as well as other people's perceived transparency of her motives and stuff like that. Again, it's kind of making me care about ostensible rich people, so there's some wizardry happening as well. It's my first Jane Austen encounter. I thought it'd be good because it's in her early work, and I don't want to read something that's sort of like peak Austen and then come to this and be like, you know, not as good as whatever. So, excellent entry point. I think it was like a 3-hour audiobook, something like that. Very enjoyable. I give it 4 stars. It's not meaty, but it is excellent fun. And then I read on audio again, As a Man Thinketh by James Allen. I gave this 3 stars. I revisited it because I saw a lot of people recommending this lately again, and I had read it a few years ago, 3 or 4, I think, and kind of come away with a meh type of situation. It's like very proto self-help advice stuff. But the thing that I took away from it this time is that there's a lot of advice that is well-meaning, definitely proto self-help. I give it 3 stars. It does what it set out to do and nothing more for me. But when I notice about male thinkers of this kind, and what is usually, I find, at least academically, criticisms of these people's work is the issue of embodiment. They always think of their bodies as sort of like, we should eat well because it is the vessel of our minds, and we need to like think of ourselves as outside of our body and construct these constructions to perceive the world in the correct way and construct our characters in such a way, etc., with them always discarding embodiment. And it's just such an, like, I wish I could remember the essay that I read on this. It might even be like Donna Haraway, probably. But men tend to always think of their body's skin as something that is protective, whereas women tend to think of their bodies as a sensation device. Like the way that they perceive the world is through touching and the senses, and through their actual bodies. Their bodies change physically when they give birth. They are subject more to issues of embodiment, because for a while, certainly when this book was published, I'm sure, they weren't able to vote. They weren't really people. They were kept people from men and traded as cattle, essentially, and whatnot. So, like, the idea that you're divorcing your entire personhood and your philosophy away from your body feels exceptionally antiquated, and every single person that I've read that was marginalized in any way does not have that problem. And so there's a kind of bloviating, roll my eyes type of thing that happens when I read this kind of philosophy and self-help. And the same thing happened. So I'm not going to penalize the book for this. It was written in like 1905. I just think it's very antiquated. There's some advice that some people might internalize and get something out of. But for me, it's just 3 stars. It does what it set out to do, and not something that I got anything out of, certainly. The books that I am reading currently, I finally got to start Mark Nash's stories, We Tell Our Children. He has excellent flows, excellent diction, excellent specificity, verbiage, all the things that I bitched about basically during this for other books is present in this. Some of the stories are quite short, like 5 to 9 pages. Some of them are a little bit longer. None of them have been duds so far. And always bringing up interesting stuff about generally raising children, which you might expect. But in like a quirky, prismatic kind of way, like you tilted this story or the way in which we educate or socialize our kids in such a way, and tilt it just a little way to look at it like in a more intelligent, insightful, or sometimes a satirical kind of way. Sometimes even a sad way in the sense that parents trying to nourishing their children are inadvertently damaging them in the last story that I read. So yeah, I think I'll have a lot to say on this. I've already bookmarked 2 of my favorite stories. Excellent stuff. And then I'm also halfway through Quixote, which I'm feeling kind of war and PC about, basically. It's doing what it set out to do. Sometimes it's funny, sometimes it's not. The concepts itself are much more interesting to think about than the actual blow-by-blow or the plot or characterization. There's a lot of shitting pants in this, like, I think 3 or 4 times it's happened now, halfway in. It's a certain type of humor that's maybe a little too lowbrow for what I had in mind. But it's also not taxing. The flow is good. I think reading it in small increments is the key. I think if I had tried to make a go of this over like a concerted effort of like 2 or 3 days, it would kill me. But slowly and with a group, Skelly Dowling About the Books is hosting this along with Alan and somebody else, I'm not sure. And the discussion in the Voxer has been illuminating and interesting and helped me to appreciate aspects of this more. So far, this is hovering around like 3.5. And that's it. That's my week. So if you have any questions, comments, put them below. Always love talking to people. And otherwise, I will see you next video.